Шановні, наступний спікер Джо Реннік, який зараз розповість про себе. Він працівник компанії JumpCloud. І сьогодні поговоримо про Conditional Access та Single Sign-On, а також Zero Trust технології. Я подивився трошки презентацію, дуже цікаво. Joel, happy to see you. It's early morning in California.
Minneapolis, so not California, but
not California.
But yes,
okay.
It's early morning both places.
I've seen in your presentation Napa Valley, so I thought that you are there. So,
only wish I was there sometimes.
Okay. Joel, sorry for delay. Thank you for your time. So take microphone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let me get my slides up. I'm trying to.
You can also change default background. This was my experiment with a virtual background. You can change it in preferences.
That's fine. I don't,
okay.
no problems there. All right. I just got to find out where my slides went in Keynote. So I can put this together. There it is. I'm trying to play in a window and see how that works. All right, perfect. Because I got some live demos here we can do. And then as I go through this, more than welcome to take questions in the chat. I've got the chat up here in another screen. Who can start? Sure. All right. And share screen. All right. How does this go? You can see me in a couple places.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Looks nice. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Yuri. Excited to be here. Glad to do this. And, very interested in sharing kind of some of the stuff that we're working on. I'm Joel, head of identity engineering. I don't know where there it is. I can point that way. Oh, everything's backwards. There we go. Head of identity engineering here at JumpCloud. I've been at JumpCloud about 6 months. And unfortunately, none of what I'm talking about today is any of my code. I've spent the last 6 months hiring about a few dozen developers. So hopefully maybe the next time we talk, I'll be able to talk about some of the things that my team has done. You may know me from such products as Nomad or Jamf Connect. So we're looking at doing some kind of different stuff here at JumpCloud. And JumpCloud's pretty cool. We're not just a Mac. I know this is a Mac conference. The Mac is near and dear to my heart. It's the only thing that I use. It's the only thing I develop on. But it has been very interesting for me to be in a multi-platform environment now, where we do have the Mac, Windows. We've got some Linux coverage as well, plus mobile. So it's been interesting. So Yuri asked me, how did I wake up at 4:30 in the morning? And that's George on the far side on the right and Jane right next to George. And they're the ones that wake me up so early in the morning. So it wasn't even a problem to wake up because they get me up around 4:30, 5 o'clock to go, I don't know, chase squirrels or do something outside. So that was not a problem. And then this is the other thing that's helping me stay awake is coffee. So between those two things, early morning, not an issue. So here's where Yuri thought I was in Napa Valley. And this is just, it's a little scene setter. So work is different, right? From a year or two ago, lots of things going on in the world. Everything's changed, right? And so you have a lot more people working in much different environments than they did before. We understand that. Our entire organization is remote. Prior to the pandemic, we were kind of going that direction anyway. Now we're 100% remote for every person we have within JumpCloud. So I've hired on about 24 developers over the last 6 months around the world. All of them, I've only seen 2 of them in person. So it's a very unique and to some degree challenging experience to make sure that you can hire good people, put them into places and get them up and running. Part of how at least makes this easier is what we're going to chat about today, which is some of the conditional access pieces that are involved in this. And so we're going to chat about conditional access, how you can make a different approach, maybe a different evolution to this. While we're certainly going to focus on some of the JumpCloud pieces that we have, you'll forgive me for that. But hopefully I'll give you some tips, tricks, other things about just how to do conditional access in general as you go through this. And so, good stuff there. Very interested in seeing what we can do and how we can help through that is there. So again, focus a little bit on the JumpCloud stuff as I give you some of the demos and things, but we'll talk about zero trust. We'll talk about conditional access in general and kind of how it goes in and how it works. So this was the before times, right? You had a lot of people in an office. You believe that your security footprint was mostly on the desktops, right? In office buildings and securing networks and making sure wireless worked. And the concept of remote work was mostly, can they have a VPN coming in or something else like that, right? How can we manage those devices or how can we just make sure they can get connectivity? There wasn't as much of the other consideration about some of these pieces. Of course, now we're in a whole different world and this is flipped almost 100% the other way, right? And so that's where we've got now a lot more remote users coming in, significant amount, you've got the Brady Bunch Zoom screen all over the place, right? And so how do we manage that? How do we look at that? Well, conditional access is a big piece of that. We want to make sure that users coming in are using devices that might be managed or have a level of security that's enabled on them that you want to make sure that they can't get to some of those other resources if that's the case. So, all right, office work, right? Maybe this is, maybe some of you are doing this kind of thing. What we found instead is this could be a live view of our office. We have a wonderful office in Louisville, Colorado. It sits about 300 people. JumpCloud's about 750 people total now. So about 300 people here in this office. We've got another brand new office in Denver, Colorado that we started working on before the pandemic and before we decided to move to completely remote. So it's an office building that we'll probably never do much with. On a given day, maybe only about 30 people are in each of these, right? So it's, I know, unfortunately, I think our leases are 10 years. So we're going to have an office for a long time, but it's mostly going to look like this. We do occasionally do what we call offsite on-sites where since everybody is remote, we will sometimes fly a few of us in when you've just got a kind of a hairy problem that you want to solve. We come into one location and are able to then do that work in the office, which is offsite for us now because we're not used to working in there. So anyway, with this being the general sense, how do you protect those users that are never going to be in an office like this? Well, here's where we've got a bit of a continuum here where we go from password management. That was what JumpCloud kind of started. JumpCloud's 8 years old. Focus on password management early on. Then we got into Cloud Directory, LDAP, Radius, these kinds of things that you would do very early on. That led into being an identity provider, which then came into single sign-on, multi-factor. We then started to doing some management work. So we've got an MDM for Apple devices. We've got management for Windows, management for Linux, so we can manage your entire estate from one location. So all of that is part of our process that we're going here. What we're going to talk about here today is just this conditional access and zero trust aspect. So zero trust is a bag of screaming cats. It's marketecture, architecture defined by marketing. But we're going to kind of hopefully show you a couple of layers of things that you can do on your own to put this in together. And then sometime maybe next year, we'll talk about passwordless. We've been doing a lot of work with passwordless, but we've not been so focused on completely removing the password, even though that's a fantastic goal to have, especially with some of the newer technologies that have come out recently. But we did want to focus a lot more on just, can we remove as many passwords as possible? Users don't mind putting in a password now and then. It's when they have to put it in 10 times a day or something like that that we want to reduce. So one of the things that we're working on there, we'll talk about that maybe next year. All right, zero trust. One of my favorite memes about this. So this is Fred from Scooby-Doo, right? And he's unmasked the villain, which we all thought was zero trust, but really zero trust is multi-factor authentication. It's network segmentation and it's least privileges. There's a few more pieces to that, but zero trust is primarily just focusing on basic security principles that we probably all should have been doing the whole time. But now we're thinking about a little bit more, right? A lot of focus on zero trust is just kind of the concept. Would you put that service on the internet? Would you feel comfortable if whatever server, whatever cloud, whatever piece that your users might be using, would you be comfortable having that on the internet? And if not, then you should do the exact same hardening security posture that you would do otherwise. And so a lot of that, again, comes down to multi-factor. Why do we care about multi-factor? Well, because it typically proves that a user is there. It's more than just a password that can get shared around. And it also is typically very highly phishing resistant. Different types of multi-factor have different impacts on phishing, but especially if you get into the biometrics, it can prove that there's an actual human involved in the process. And that should stop most, maybe not all, the scammers are getting even more complicated as we go forward, but should stop most of the phishing attacks that come out there. And then obviously network segmentation, making sure that the right devices can hit it. Anymore, trying to do too much network segmentation gets pretty complicated. So just don't depend on a VPN. Don't depend on just that secure access that you may have, especially when users are coming in from all kinds of devices, right? We've got iPads that they may have. We've got phones. We've got mobile devices. We've got maybe IoT things that you want to hit some of this stuff. So a lot of different pieces coming into your network. You want to be able to feel good about their connectivity. So one of the ways to do that is conditional access. Now, from the JumpCloud perspective, we kind of look at this as a continuum as to how the user gets onto the device, from there starts to do their work, and then accesses resources. So in this case, especially since we're talking about Macs here, if you don't have an MDM service that can do Apple device enrollment, please run, don't walk to do that. Particularly in a remote environment, this becomes very, very important. We're sending equipment to developers that we've never met in person. So we have to ship these devices to them sight unseen. So that's why, we have them go through the JumpCloud automated device enrollment. They have to sign in, authenticate, and only then can they do the rest of their setup. So if you don't have an MDM that does this, go get one. It doesn't have to be JumpCloud, although we'll be happy to talk to you about that. You can go look at Micro MDM, which is a great free MDM out there. It takes a little bit of work to put together, but it'll get you some of this functionality so you can have that layer of authentication in there. All right. Once you've been through there, we've got a variety of MFA solutions. The one that probably most people use is we've got our own iOS app, also on Android, called JumpCloud Protect. Nice app, not a whole lot to it, but that's kind of the point, is that it's just got one or two buttons that you can click on it. It does have the requirement for biometrics. So that way you can ensure that, again, there's a user, there's a person in front of that multi-factor application, so that phishing and other things get a lot harder as you go through that. Here's some of the settings. We can show you this. We'll do a little bit of demo in a bit about how this puts together. So there you can require multi-factor all the time. Here's a phone, and this is kind of what the app, what most people see it, is you'll get a notification, very much if you've used any of the push MFA apps, very similar to that. There you go, pretty simple, just deny or approve. And once you hit approve, we'll allow you through. So real easy, real simple way of adding multi-factor into your environment. And that's probably going to be one of the single biggest things you can do to ensure that you've got a better security posture for a lot of your users. We also do OTP codes. Some people like those for offline usage or for being able to just have a little bit more flexibility. So we'll allow you to do OTP codes. It's not super exciting, but you can keep other apps. If you've got, GitHub or something else like that, you can generate the OTP codes inside the JumpCloud Protect app, and we'll be able to use those. We also support WebAuthn. This is another thing that if you're not doing much with WebAuthn, you should start paying attention to this. Prior to the last let's say, year, this was mostly focused on FIDO keys, like YubiKeys, great pieces of hardware, but they are a piece of hardware. And we found that a lot of users just weren't that excited about going out and having a little dongle that they had to keep plugging in and things like that. So that's where Apple, Microsoft, and Google recently announced that they were all working on passkeys. Passkeys are FIDO keys that just aren't in hardware, right? So that's when you go to Safari, you go to Chrome, and you can use Touch ID, and it'll make a soft, but it's hardware backed. Sometimes FIDO key gets murky, but it's a great way of having multi-factor and passwordless going forward authentication to these websites. So we have this also for JumpCloud, so it makes it very easy. If you don't want to use the app, if you've got a user base, for example, that may not have phones, or may not want to use your phone or your app on their phone, depending on whatever worker rules and other things you may have to have in your environment. So you can use WebAuthn in a lot of cases, really nice, just within the browser. Pretty simple setup. So take a look at WebAuthn or Passkeys if you haven't. Passkeys have gotten a lot of press recently. So some cool stuff. So all this kind of gets us to conditional access. In conditional access, we've tried to keep pretty simple. You're going to see us building a lot on this as we go forward. JumpCloud's in kind of a unique position in that we have both the identity provider and the management of the systems together in the same place. So we've got some good insight into what's going on. We've got some, availability for looking at what's the state of the host. Should we let it in? Should we not let it in? And so we've right now got some kind of just very introductory conditional access policies that you can kick the tires with. You're going to be seeing a lot more of this as we go forward, just to make it so much easier. And again, since we kind of own the whole stack, at least we can, you can use your own MDM with JumpCloud. That's perfectly fine. But if you use all us for everything, it makes it a little bit easier in some cases. And so in most cases, right now, what we're really keying in on is the device managed or not. So I know we had a couple of questions in the last session about BYO devices. BYO devices are great. A lot of people use them, but you may have a set of applications or a set of services that you want to only make available to managed devices. If the device is managed, it typically means it's corporate owned, right? And you have policies, so you can ensure that they're up to your security policy. So that's why we have this. We also have the ability to block from certain IP addresses as well. Show you that a little bit in the demo. And then once you've determined what the policy is, you can then have an action. In some cases, you can just deny the authentication option. So, too bad, so sad, you can't use this cloud application, the SAML application in most cases, or you can require them to do an MFA step up. Whereas if you are coming from a managed device that is a lot more secure, the chances of that being compromised are much lower. So then don't require the multi-factor all the time. So you've got some options as to what you can do with that. We also have some directory insights, which I'll show you as we go through this, which can kind of show you what's going on and how to manage some of these things. So with that, let me hop into a quick demo. So we've got a JumpCloud console here. You can see we've got a couple of users, a couple of groups, some other stuff in there that you can see. And keep in mind, anybody that's interested in this, anybody, if you've got an email address, Gmail, whatever, we don't care, sign up, you get 10 accounts, able to play around with and do whatever you want with that. So that's just jumpcloud.com. So if you want to just get a feeling for this, whether you're going to use this or not, and obviously prefer that you do, but you're more than welcome to make your own choices. You're more than welcome to sign up for an account and just start kicking the tires on what this looks like. So in this particular case, I've got a couple of SSO apps. And one in particular is this, just a test app that I've set up, put a little, I've got a Linux box with a few things running on it to put some stuff up there and go. And I've gone down here to conditional policies, and I've actually got a policy that forces authentication through a JumpCloud managed device. So in this case, I've said all SSO applications, if you're on a JumpCloud managed device, allow authentication. So that's the first rule. It's kind of like firewalls. You go through the rules in order as you come through here. I then have another rule, which is all applications. Again, we could specify just select ones if we wanted. If you're an unmanaged device, we'll deny you access. All right. So first we'll show you when this doesn't work. So here I go to this URL. Ooh, I got to turn this on. Hold, please. Let me get that set up so that the demo works a little bit nicer. So I've got this SAML app running in a host in G Suite. All right. And this is why live demos are even more fun, but this is an easy one. There we go. All right, we're up and running. Nope. Now we're up and running. Perfect. All right, so let me reload this. All right, so this is taking me to an authentication page, and I'm going to sign in here as a test account. There we go, and my password. And I'm going to get denied. I get thrown into our user console because my username and password were correct. So it knows that I'm able to do this. However, I don't have access to this application because I'm not allowed to connect because I'm not on a managed device, right? So due to resource policies, wah, wah, sad trombone. And if I go back here into my admin console and I come back down to this directory settings here, you can see that there was an SSO login attempt and the policy denied access. So now we've got some logging that somebody tried to come in, but they weren't coming from a managed device. Therefore, we didn't let them authenticate. I have a VM here. So let me sign into a device that's actually enrolled in this JumpCloud setup. And you can tell, this is how we kind of make the magic work. We've got a keychain here that allows for a specific certificate that's issued. We have an agent that runs on the device. That agent, this is on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And every 30 days, it'll get you a brand new device trust certificate. So that's in here. You can see it. We keep it in a separate keychain so that we kind of keep it out of the user's way. They don't get confused by what's going on in there. And then we're able to manage that, keep it up to date. With this in place, I can now go to Safari. And if I go to token, jclab.dev, and go to my SAML app, this will take me there. And I'll sign in again with the same username and password that I had before. But this time, it's actually going to allow me through. So here, I set this up so you can see this. In most cases, the user won't see this because we'll have set an identity preference. But this is showing you that we're actually validating the certificate. And that certificate exchange happens. So now I'm able to sign in. Again, same username and password. And I've authenticated, and the VM's a little bit pokey on the internet side here, but there you go. Now you can see the secret SAML application that we have. So this shows you that we've got conditional access. Again, nothing overly complicated, just very much a gating factor. Because we know if you're on a managed device with MDM, we can make sure that you've got File Vault running, you've got all these other things. So if that's the case, then allow this through. And you don't have to do this with every application, right? You can create some pretty complicated policies here where you would go in and have a specific application that you're using. So that way you could say some applications anybody can use as long as you have a username and password. Fantastic. Some applications would require multi-factor. So these might be slightly more sensitive. And then other applications that you have would be, very, very sensitive. Maybe this is Salesforce or something like that, where you'd have customer data that would require not only multi-factor, but also coming in from a managed device. So a pretty easy way of just kind of making that delineation between those. And then again, if I go back here to the directory, you can see that we do have another SSO login, and this one was successful. There was no error message in there. And so you can get where I'm coming from, IP addresses and the rest. And if I go back here to conditional policies, you can also manage by a couple of different conditions, and the second one is IP address. So if you got a particular network, for example, you have a corporate network, maybe you do have a few people coming into the office, then you can allow them to come in, maybe not from managed devices. Gives you a little more flexibility, especially if you're looking for kiosk or something like that, where you might not be able to put a JumpCloud agent on them to generate that certificate. So with that, let me kick back to the slides real quick. And I think we are, there's the demo Q&A. So happy to take any questions. I don't see anything in the chat right now, but feel free to yell if anything comes up. I'll have some more coffee. All right. Perfect. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, everyone, for coming out here. Love to do these conferences, and you know, it's a shame we can't be together, but ideally we can do that in the future going forward. But excited to have, you know, good stuff like this where we can chat about these topics, do some learning, do some education as we go. All right. Do we have a question? We've got a hand raised.
Joel, I love live sessions, and especially early morning live sessions. It's a high energy one. Thank you for this. Yeah, it was amazing. So admins could use your single sign-on technology with other MDM solutions. Is
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. But for sure, it's better to use all-in-one. Yeah,
that's what we're trying for, right? You know, so JumpCloud started as an identity provider and really focused on small to medium businesses. We're not here to satisfy the needs of 100,000 person companies, right? There's Microsoft, Okta, they're all focused on that very high end. We wanted to focus very much on the small to medium, the 50 to 500. We do have some customers that are tens of thousands. They're fantastic customers. We love them. But a lot of the times when we start thinking about new products, we start to come from a very simple, you know, stance, right? You know, how can we get you into single sign-on? How can we get you into multi-factor without having a huge amount of effort or knowledge on your side? And so that's what we very much try to do. Yuri, as you mentioned, we do have device management. It's all this section right here that we've got. So we can do that. And again, multi-platform. So Mac, Windows, Linux, iOS. I think we're getting some Android stuff in a little bit as well. So you can cover all the platforms if you want. However, we do have customers that just use this for LDAP and Radius and the single sign-on side up here.
It's definitely clear that your target market is a small and medium business, because you use different words in your admin account. Yeah,
absolutely. That's very intentional. You know, for example, so I've got a team, we're working on certificate PKI services so that you'll be able to generate certificates to do whatever you want to do. We do a lot of certificates on our own for things like device trust, but we want to give you the option. If you want to put a certificate on all your devices, great, put a certificate on all your devices. When we look at this, you know, you can have a million different knobs when you're generating certificates, RSA 1024, SHA-1. Some of these are really bad decisions, right? So we're probably only going to give you one or two buttons and take away a lot of that complexity for you. We're going to make good choices. We're going to give you some options, but we want to make it so you're not overwhelmed by all these, you know, settings and configurations.
Joel, as I know, a lot of admins from the community have to deal also with the Linux and Windows computers. Could you please describe how it feels to manage other platforms from JumpCloud?
It ends up being pretty similar. You may not be surprised that I don't have a lot of Windows systems in my tenant that I'm playing around with. Yeah. But you get them all listed here. You can see what the latest versions of them are, make sure they're up to date. We've got some patch management for you know, Windows and Ubuntu and some of the other ones. So for the most part, they're kind of very similar in that they're all lumped together. You know, we give you the little icons to let you know if you want to do policies, you can come in here, create a new policy, and then you've got your options of which ones that you want to have. And so we try to keep it that from an admin perspective, it's not that different. You're just managing devices. Obviously, there's a bit of a different flow. There's a few different buttons on each one. Because some things, you know, you can't manage Touch ID on a Windows system, right? So we're going to have policies specific to the operating systems, but for the most part, we try to make it very generic's not the right word, but very similar between all of them, so that you don't have, you know, a lot of confusion and some other stuff around that.
Okay, so we have also freelance admins here, so they they can register for the free account up to 10 seats and
absolutely
set it up to their customers for Mac OS and Windows, and it will be full product.
Full product for up to 10 users. After that, we kind of nag you.
Yeah.
And we say, hey, you should really, maybe give us a little bit of money since we're giving you some value. If you are managing multiple customers, especially like you said, freelance admins, maybe working with a couple of smaller shops, we do have some MSP, managed service provider setups, where you can have a parent account and manage all of the customers at once. So, reach out to us if you have an interest in that. We'd be happy to work with you on that.
Great. And we have a question. What are the main pain points with the implementation of Zero Trust? Great
question, right? The biggest problem about Zero Trust is you're going to get barraged by a whole bunch of vendors, selling you all this scary stuff that's out there and how you need all this Zero Trust security. And, it's only $10 a month per user or something else like that. So that's probably the biggest kind of philosophical threat out there. From an admin perspective, you've got to be a little bit careful, right? Because the world, different users operate in different ways. And you can have some unintended consequences. We've had customers who, with all the best intentions, lock down their services to only manage devices, right? But then suddenly they find out the CEO is using a personal phone and is peeved now that they can't get in to a particular application because, rules don't apply to them, right? So conditional access can get a little tricky. We've got some ways around that where in the conditional policies, you can have them apply just to specific users, right? So in this case, we've done all users. You can exclude various people from that. I mean, obviously, the more exclusions you do, the wider you're opening up some of these security possibilities. On the flip side, if it's the CEO of the company, if they tell you to do it, well, maybe it's their devices, right? So it's on them. So that's where some of the Zero Trust piece gets a little bit more complicated into how do you classify these different things? The email, for example, we probably have less and less in email. Certainly within JumpCloud, we heavily operate through Slack. That's how I talk to all of my developers on a daily basis. I probably have not sent most of the people that work for me, I've never sent them an email.
Well,
I have only reached out to them over Slack. So should Office 365, should G Suite or whatever you might be using for email, should that be managed through Zero Trust? Is that sensitive anymore? So these are some of the questions that you might come up with. And then you say, well, since all the real work gets done in Slack, let's lock down Slack to only manage devices. But then, I use Slack on my phone quite a bit. So that's where, yes, we can put in technical policies to solve this, and I'm excited that we have them, and it's a good tool in your tool belt. But there is a layer of, politics, HR in this that I think is where the most complicated parts of Zero Trust are, with just because you can, should you, and then what should those policies be?
Okay, thank you, Joel. So any other questions? Okay. So
thank you very much for having me, Yuri. This is great. Love doing these kinds of sessions. So let us know when you do this again.
Joel, I want to thank you, especially in this obstacle of terms and your local time. And thanks a lot for this live session. Again, it's very important to see live person and have ability to chat or to ask a question. Thank you for your time, Joel.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. See ya.
See you. Bye, Joel.